any longer. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Republican Whip. Mr. President, once again, the President of the United States has failed to meet the statutory deadline to propose a budget. In fact, he's missed the deadline so many times that people hardly notice anymore. Failure seems to become the rule, not the exception. The President has now missed the budget deadline 5 times since he took office in 2009. By comparison, his 3 White House predecessors missed the deadline a total of 4 times in 20 years. 5 times under President Obama, 4 times in the last 20 years under his 3 immediate predecessors. All totaled, it's now the 18th time that the Obama administration has missed a legal deadline related to the federal budget. I guess the President and his administration consider the law purely an advisory matter, not binding on them. The law is for other people, not for this President and for his administration, seems to be their attitude. Now, the reason this is so important is because, as we all know, whether it's a family budget or a budget for your business, setting a budget is where you establish your priorities. The things you have to have, the things you'd like to have, but maybe need to put off, and then those things that you really can't afford. That's how you budget. That's why it's so important. But if your budget includes massive amounts of new spending, along with firm opposition to major reforms, well, you'd have no choice but to ask for a huge tax increase. And the President, I don't think, wants to put himself on record again, like he did last year, for another huge tax increase, nor does he want his party's members who are running for election in 2014 to have to cast the hard vote on the President's own budget. So, you know, last year his 2014 budget proposal would have raised taxes by roughly $1 trillion. $1 trillion tax increase. That's on top of $1.7 trillion that taxes have gone up during the last 5 years under this administration. Well, it looks like the President's priorities are more taxes, more spending, and more debt. But you know, if those sorts of priorities led to robust economic growth and job creation, we'd see one of the strongest economic recoveries in American history. But the truth is, more taxes, more spending, and more debt are not a recipe for economic growth and job creation, just the opposite. We're seeing the evidence of that right now. We are suffering through the weakest economic recovery since the Great Recession in modern history. Actually, we're seeing the weakest economic recovery since the Great Depression right now. And there are a lot of reasons, but the Congressional Budget Office has given us some reasons that I want to talk about just briefly. They talk about Obamacare and its impact on job growth and economic growth. Matter of fact, the Affordable Care Act, the President's signature legislative accomplishment, the Congressional Budget Office said the number of full-time workers will go down by 2 million in the coming years as a result of the Affordable Care Act. So in addition to people getting canceled policies or sticker shock and finding out that their health care costs didn't go down, they went up, or finding that if you like your doctor, you can't keep them, what we're finding is that these same people may find themselves out of work as a result of the policies in the Affordable Care Act. The Congressional Budget Office looked primarily at how employers would respond to a new penalty for failing to offer insurance to employees that work more than 30 hours. That response would include cutting people's hours, hiring fewer workers, and lowering wages for new jobs. I know my friends on the other side of the aisle agree with the President when he said we ought to raise the minimum wage. But one of the problems is the President's own health care policy that they all voted for is killing full-time work and putting people in part-time work, meaning that their weekly wages have been depressed. For them, the answer is not to deal with the source of that problem, which is Obamacare, but to fix wages at 40% higher than they currently are per hour, which we know, economists tell us, and it's intuitively true, is going to put more people out of work, put more pressure on workers. Well, perhaps one of the most distressing thing about the Congressional Budget Office report today is what they said, what the prospects look like for the President's remaining term in office. The Budget Office does not see unemployment falling below 6% for the rest of President Obama's term. 6% for the remainder of his term. Yet despite all of this, the President still won't get behind genuine pro-growth reforms. He won't support genuine reforms of our existing programs like Medicare and Social Security that would actually save them and put them on a fiscally sustainable path. He has no plan for controlling our national debt. You know, I went back and looked, Mr. President, last time Congress came within one vote of passing a balanced budget amendment. You know what the national debt was then? $4.85 trillion. You know what it is today? It's in excess of $17 trillion, with no end in sight. So the truth is, Mr. President, that Republicans have put forward ideas for streamlining federal regulations, for mitigating the negative effects of the Affordable Care Act, and for replacing Obamacare with patient-centered reforms that would cut costs, broaden quality insurance coverage, and improve patient access. But so far, the Majority Leader and the President have shown zero interest in trying to work with Republicans to solve our nation's most serious economic challenges, which have a direct impact on the American people. Instead, the President said he's going to go it alone. He's got a pen, he's got a phone, but as I suggested before, one of the things he could do that would put Americans back to work almost immediately and make us more North American energy independent would be to sign the Keystone XL pipeline. Mr. President, I know my time has expired, and I would ask unanimous consent that the 3 articles I was referring to on the CBO report be made part of the record following my remarks.
Without objection. Senator from Washington.
President, I rise today to join my colleagues in asking for the passage of the Farm Bill that we're going to have a vote on here shortly, and I want to thank my colleague, the chair of the Agricultural Committee from Michigan, for her unbelievable work on this very important policy for America. I know she understands these issues well because while everybody thinks of Michigan as a manufacturing state, it also is a very big agricultural state, and we share a lot of the same crops, being kind of on a northern plateau, so apples and wine and a variety of things. And I want to certainly thank her for her help and support on getting an important new program in our school lunches for very nutritious peas and lentils called Pulse Crops, and to thank her for her help on that. But, Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the importance of the Farm Bill because it is a jobs bill for our nation. 2 years ago, I joined my colleague, Senator Johans from Nebraska, and sent a bipartisan letter with 44 senators saying it was time to act on the Farm Bill because we thought it was so important for our economy as we were still struggling coming out of a recession. And so today it's finally here, that opportunity to put all that hard work into a bill that goes to the President's desk. Agriculture employs 16 million Americans, and it produces exports worth $115 billion of agricultural products to markets around the world. I don't think we always focus on that. A lot of times we come out here and we talk about the individual crops in our state or the individual focus, but what we really need to understand is that it is a very big product for the United States. And we live in a very competitive global economy. And one of the biggest advantages that we have in that global economy is that we in the United States of America know how to grow things. So the emerging middle class around the world can now afford to eat higher quality products. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce CEO Tom Donahue, I think, put it best in a speech that he gave about the global marketplace last year. He said, quote, "You play to your strengths. You leverage your advantages, and then you find ways to improve them, and one of the greatest strengths in America is agriculture." End quote. Mr. Donahue said those remarks as an advantage of what innovation is driving in American agriculture. And he's absolutely right, because not only do we know how to grow things, we also know how to innovate. And there's a lot of innovation going on in the ag economy. In fact, there are some people in the Pacific Northwest that say now there's as much investment going into new innovation in agriculture as there were recently in high-tech or even green energy. So people get it. It's a great investment. I've seen in Washington State cutting-edge research done at our labs in Prosser to new wheat rotation crops in the Palouse, to savvy entrepreneurs making connections like getting Washington cherries into the new Korean market. So simply put, this is a growing opportunity for the U.S. economy. Americans, farmers and businesses are seeing demands for their products rise on two fronts. First, American consumers want to buy their products directly from the farms in their communities. So that means that the farm are creating product for exactly what their end customer wants. And because they're doing that, they can make more money on delivering to the end customer exactly the kind of product that they want. And secondly, a rising middle class in places like Asia to South America want to use their newfound spending power on purchasing our products as well. So this farm bill helps on both of those fronts. Again, thanks to the chairwoman from Michigan. It helps get more goods to the market, and whether that's a farmer's market around the corner from your local supermarket or whether that's a new market in South Korea. In 2030, China's middle class will have 1 billion people. That's up from 150 million today. And India's middle class will grow by more than 800%. And maybe because we sit on the Pacific, just like the presiding officer, you know how important it is to get products to those marketplaces. In 2012, the United Nations reported that the world will need 70% more food by the middle of the century. This is a tremendous opportunity, but only if Congress acts today and passes the Farm Bill. We need to maintain our investment in research and export so American farmers can thrive and win in the expanding global marketplace. I'm confident if we do that, our farmers and our businesses, and we make sure that they will have a level playing field, if they do, then we will win. But other countries are playing for keeps, too. Every farmer around the world wants access to that rising middle class. The European Union spent $700 million on export promotion for food products in 2011. That's nearly 3 times as much as America spent. And China is planning to boost its agriculture investment over the next decade. It's a sentiment that I heard in October when I visited one of our wholesalers when he was talking to an overseas client. He was talking about export and agriculture leaders in Washington State and how other countries were starting to use, particularly the apple market, to try to open new opportunities. So that's why we need to increase opportunities within the Farm Bill and to move forward on trade deals that help open the door to new agricultural markets. That will help unleash an entrepreneurial spirit that we really need to be aggressive about. Many people have heard of Walla Walla, or maybe you haven't, or maybe you just thought that was a term. But Walla Walla is a great community in the southeast corner of our state with 30,000 people, and it is deeply, deeply tied to the global economy. It has wine and wheat and peas and lentils, and the farmers there, I know, are very appreciative of the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. They thanked me many times for making sure that that got passed. I can tell you that many of those farmers went to Bogota to try to sell American wheat to the growing Colombian middle class. And that is what entrepreneurship in America is all about. So Congress must not dampen our entrepreneurial spirit. Farmers need to start this season and make sure that they can put long-term plans in place. Then the seeds that will be planted, the fields that will be harvested, the crops that will be shipped, the smart targeted investments towards those new international markets will be done. That's what this farm bill is about. The bill, I can tell you, is a compromise, and again, I thank the chairwoman for her hard work because I know how hard she worked on forging those compromises. I can tell you that it cuts the SNAP program far more than I would have cut it. I was one of 26 senators who voted for the amendment my colleague from New York offered to restore those cuts. But it is time that we move forward. I'd like to take a second to just talk about the details of 3 reasons why people should be for this farm bill. First, as I talked about, it continues to expand the export programs that are so important for America's new markets. And while I might have been for a more robust program, some of my colleagues obviously haven't quite understood why this is such a great benefit to market U.S. products around the globe. I think some people think of big global corporations and think, oh, well, why do you need that? Well, I can tell you, when I'm talking about apples or cherries or pears, these aren't big corporations. They're a collective of hundreds or thousands of farmers working together. And when the MAP program helps target getting people in the Asian market to consume those products, it's a win-win situation for America. Secondly, this bill funds research making our crops stronger and healthier and more competitive. And third, it starts initiatives on products like the pulse crop that I think could be so beneficial to us over the long run with new, as I said, school lunches, but just healthier products. Our new farm bill will do the research on specialty crops that are so important for us in the Pacific Northwest. This is the first time in this farm bill that the reauthorization makes long-term investment in specialty crop block grant programs and specialty crop research initiatives. Again, I want to thank the gentlewoman from Michigan for her help on that, understanding how important these specialty crops are. They are not, I think everybody in America knows and around the world knows the brand of Washington apples. I can tell you I've been in the Chinese marketplace and seen how people took off the Washington label, particularly on Fuji apples, and tried to stick it on other apples because they knew that if that sticker was on that apple, that everybody in China would consume those apples even though they weren't really Washington Fujis. So what this specialty research initiative does is said that we are going to not let apples and pears and cherries basically constantly fall off the radar as it relates to research, but they will be a permanent part of a program for research and have a block grant program so that they can basically continue to do the research that's needed. And again, if any of my colleagues have ever had a chance to visit the research facilities within their state, they'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you should go and do it. But when you are fighting against or being, let's just say, on a competitive field with Australia or China or anybody else when it comes to apples, we have constantly have to answer questions about phytosanitary issues. We have constantly talk about various ways to make sure we gain access to those marketplaces. And the research, just science and research, is the only way we can fight down some of these trade barriers that exist when our products can't get into these countries. So we need to make sure that we continue to fight that. And lastly, I just want to say I'm very pleased by the fact that pulse crops, peas, lentils, things like chickpeas, things that, you know, people eat. I'm sure a lot of people ate a lot of hummus over the weekend while they were watching the Super Bowl and the Seattle Seahawks victory. But hummus is a crop that has exploded 500% in the last 15 years. It's definitely a product that people have been consuming all over the world for a long time, but we in the United States are starting to consume more of it. And the fact that that product has been such a huge increase has given our farmers in Washington State great opportunity. But this product is also a very healthy product and one that we fought hard to make sure would be included in a new school lunch program. something where students could get access to a high-protein, high-fiber product that certainly is more affordable for our schools. So we think between the research that's going to go on pulse crop derivatives and the fact that school lunches are now going to have the opportunity to serve pulse crops more aggressively, we're very, very excited about this farm bill. I want to thank my colleagues in the Senate, Senator Crapo and Risch, and my colleague from South Dakota for also helping with this, because this certainly was, and North Dakota, I should say, both states were very, very big on these pulse crops and certainly helped to make sure that this stayed in the conference report. So, again, to all my colleagues, please vote for a bill that will really help our economy, that will really help us tackle that growing middle class around the world and keep America putting great products on those market shelves and helping create more jobs in the United States. I thank the President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, first I have 10 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and the minority leaders. I would ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
I would ask, secondly, unanimous consent that a further statement regarding issues in the nutrition title be submitted into the record on my behalf.
Without objection.
Thank you. And I'd like very much to take just a moment, Mr. President. I know we'll be closing for lunch in just a moment, but there are some very important people that I need to thank today. And I want to take this moment before we have the final vote to do that. I know, listening to other colleagues as we come to major pieces of legislation, and at the end they talk about the importance of their staff, I have come to realize, Mr. President, just how powerful those words are. And I have been blessed with an incredibly talented, hardworking staff that really are the reason that we are here today talking about the Agricultural Act of 2014, and every single one of them should be very, very proud of their contribution, as I am proud of them. And this certainly starts with our staff director, Chris Adamo. I think we've been on speed dial for so long, I'm not sure I will be doing that probably just out of habit from here on in, day and night. His incredible leadership and tenacity and talent and hard work is just incredible, and Chris deserves a tremendous amount of credit for leading us here with his team, and I want to thank him very much. Also, Joe Schultz, who's our chief economist, who no matter what problem we had, he seemed to find a way to make the numbers add up. And so whether it's the commodity title or crop insurance or dairy, when at the very end it became clear that after 3 years of hard work and passing a dairy policy, it wouldn't get the support of the House Republicans, and we were going to have to rewrite it in a week and a half, which was no small thing. And Joe continued to give us the right kind of advice, and I'm proud to say that we started with a commitment to have a $23 billion in deficit reduction, counting our sequestration spending cuts, and we've ended with $23 billion in deficit reduction and spending reductions in agriculture. And Joe has been a huge reason why we've been able to get there. And also Jonathan Cordone, who is our chief counsel, who's made sure we were right on the process, worked specifically on issues like trust funds with many colleagues here around complex areas to be able to help them be able to meet the needs of their states. Important issues like payment reforms, any number of legal issues. He has been incredibly valuable and important. Russ Benham, Russ is our senior counsel on regulatory issues. Some of the toughest issues we had to address related to regulatory issues, forestry issues. We are very, very proud that in this bill there is an agriculture advisory committee to the EPA moving forward on rules, which is extremely significant to have agriculture's voice involved with the EPA in a formal way, and this and so many other areas, Russ has been very, very significant. To our conservation team, Tina May, who is amazing and is going back to the USDA next week to help to lead the implementation, which gives me confidence that this is really going to be done as we intended. But Tina May's brilliance in strategy and negotiation and commitment on these issues is unmatched, I think. And with her team, Kevin Norton and Hannah Abood, the areas of conservation really are landmark in reforms, in protecting our land and water, conservation compliance, and setting real standards around strong conservation practices. Forestry as well, important areas that we have addressed in forestry, and international food aid. America's opportunity to fulfill our values around the world and creating more flexibility for us to help feed a hungry world. Carla Tiemann, again on speed dial. I think the very last phone calls I were making and emails before we wrote and finalized the conference report were with Carla and Chris. Our energy title is about jobs. It's about energy efficiency. So proud of what we've been able to do. A landmark energy title, livestock disaster assistance, all of the area to support livestock. And again, dairy. Carla was our lead on dairy. And we, I think, finally may have stopped waking up in the middle of the night dreaming about dairy policy. I'm not sure. But we're getting there. Corey Clausen, who has led our efforts on farm credit and beginning farmers, and so proud we've added our veterans to the support there, and thank Corey so much. Brandon McBride, rural development, it's jobs, it's quality of life in rural America, and Brandon led our effort to make sure we were strengthening tools for businesses and local units of government and all of those who count on rural development. And research, a new research foundation partnership, a real commitment to research in a way we've not seen before. Thank you to Brandon for leading that effort. And of course on nutrition and fruits and vegetables, Jacqueline Snyder and Katie Nassens, who led in an extremely complicated area. Jacqueline had to negotiate some very, very difficult negotiations. I'm proud to say that we rejected every harmful policy in the House bill, and because of Jacqueline and Katie's efforts, we have a strengthened commitment to organics and farmers markets and fresh fruit and vegetables for our children in schools, and so many other areas in which we are beginning to change the paradigm about local food systems and strengthening opportunities for local markets for our farmers. Grant Calvin, who has worked so hard on commodities as well as livestock and trade. And of course, exports, so very important to us. It's an area of real strength and jobs for our country, and I want to thank Grant for all of his expertise. Alexis Sanchuk and Kyle Varner, who have, as staff assistants, helped with the entire team every step of the way. They have been there to help us on every single project, every single effort that we needed help with. And I want to thank Alexis and Kyle. Jesse Williams and Nicole Hertenstein, who are clerks, and their entire team who basically kept the whole thing together. They make sure that we were doing the right thing on point, and I want to thank Jesse and Nicole and their team as well. And finally, let me go to, Mr. President, my personal staff, Bill Sweeney, my Chief of Staff, who's been with me in a multitude of different capacities, but from telling the story on the floor with our charts to making sure that we had a coordinated team between the agriculture committee staff and all the talented people on my personal staff, as well as wonderful strategic advice. Bill is, I'm proud to say, my chief of staff, and has been invaluable in this process. Matt Van Kuyken, as well as my legislative director, working as a team every single step of the way. Our press team, when we look at telling the story of the new Farm Bill approach, Colin Schwartz and Ben Becker and Alex Barraga and Will Eberly and Matt Williams telling this story, getting the facts out every step of the way. My state team, led by my state director, Teresa Plahetka, Kelly Fox, Mary Judnich, Brandon Fewens, and Corey Hall, Jeremy Hosking and Adrian Walker, making sure that Michigan's voice was heard in every part of this bill. A tremendous amount of hard work, and this bill is better, certainly for Michigan, as a result of all of their efforts. Casey Gillette and Senator Reed's office working as our partner on all of this. Gary Myrick and Trish Engel and Tim Mitchell and all of our floor staff for their patience as we have passed this once, passed this twice, and then finally passed the conference committee, as we will do. Shouldn't get ahead of myself. Will pass the conference committee this afternoon. Legislative Counsel Michelle Johnson-Weeder and Gary Endicott. I want to say thank you to Senator Cochran's staff. T.A. Hawks and James Glick have led that effort, and we want to thank them for their partnership and excellent work. And finally, our Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, and the USDA. The technical expertise that we have received on every single section has been absolutely invaluable. And when it came to the final days on dairy, the Secretary played a very, very critical role in helping us get the compromise that will allow us to meet the goals and address farmers all over the country. And last but not least, the Congressional Budget Office, who we called on day and night, and we appreciate their efforts. So, Mr. President, I appreciate your patience in allowing me to do this at this time. I wanted to make sure we had a chance to say thank you to a lot of folks that deserve, as usual, a tremendous amount of credit for getting this done. They're the folks behind the scenes that have made this happen, and I'm very, very proud of each and every one of them.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.
So the Senate is in a break now to allow members to attend their weekly party meetings. Lawmakers spent the morning working on the 5-year farm bill that passed in the House last week. The measure authorizes nearly $1 trillion in agriculture programs, of which about $756 billion would go toward nutrition assistance. Senators will return from their break at 2:15 Eastern, and shortly after that, at about 2:35, they'll take a final passage vote on the farm bill. You can see live coverage of the Senate when members return here on C-SPAN 2.